Being wrong is hard, isn't it? That's the reason we can know that it happens to us individually and collectively all the time, and yet somehow be perpetually convinced that it isn't going to happen again. We don't necessarily want to face down the reality that something we say or something we believe is going to end up being incorrect. That's why humility is so well represented in the teachings of world religions, is because it turns out that we humans need very regular reminders in our houses of worship about our fallibility, or we are more than prone to badly misestimate things. How prone are we? I generally consider myself a very detail-oriented and competent person. Those seeking confirmation of the detail-oriented part should feel free to walk by the RE office and ask Michelle what happens when she violates the whiteboard marker color coding scheme. I consider myself a competent and detail-oriented person, but even so, it's only a matter of time before I mess up. And sometimes it's a little mistake, but I can flub them up real good too. We're talking a range of thinking, even after 4 years of cooking for my wife, that I could get away with including just a grind or two's worth of pepper without her noticing, all the way up to believing that I could successfully fake it as a bartender with no previous experience when I first moved to Georgia in 2012. What these experiences in my life, and the ones that Chuck Klosterman writes about in our reading for this morning, highlight is that even the small potatoes things that we get wrong in our lives can be painful to think about and experience. They may be funny and benign now, but on the nights they happened, it meant hours of fuming and frustration that I messed up that dinner, and days worth of fear, confusion, and anger at myself and that would-be bar owner / employer who decided hustle and grit weren't enough to make up for a near complete lack of cocktail knowledge and charm. So when we extrapolate that wrongness and that potential for wrongness out to bigger questions on the much larger scales of big groups of people, it's no wonder we are so averse to the idea that we have been getting something wrong collectively. That idea brings with it high degree of tension. And that's precisely why I am so curious about what things we are all certain about that are actually not true, and why I am going to tempt fate in a sermon about humility by suggesting that UUs are just the right folks to be asking this question. Let me begin with that first part, the question of what there is that currently exists as a consensus among thinking people that might not actually be the case. In the book that our reading comes from, But What If We're Wrong by Chuck Klosterman, he interviews two scientists who represent opposite ends of the spectrum on this question. The first is Neil deGrasse Tyson, the famous astrophysicist who is known, among many other things, for narrating the show Cosmos. Klosterman cites the example of dinosaurs having previously been thought to be cold-blooded when he himself was growing up in the early 1980s, but that paleontological consensus having later been changed by about a decade later as evidence that science is still changing, still uncovering big new things. So he interviews Tyson with this hypothesis. He sits down as the author of But What If We're Wrong? And he pitches him about how science was wrong about dinosaurs when he was growing up, and he thinks it's possible it and we are wrong about some other really major things. Here's what Tyson says. The only examples you can give of complete shifts in widely held beliefs, beliefs being completely thrown out the window, are from before 1600. Science gets conducted by experiment. There is no truth that does not exist without experimental verification of that truth. And not only one person's experiment, but an ensemble of experiments testing that same idea. And only when an ensemble of experiments statistically agree do we then talk about an emerging truth within science. And that emerging truth does not change because it was verified. In 1603, the microscope was invented, and in 1609, the telescope was invented. So these things gave us tools to replace our own senses, because our own senses are quite feeble when it comes to recording objective reality. So it's not like this is a policy. This is, holy moly, this really works. I can establish an objective truth that's not a function of my own state of mind, and you can do a different experiment and come up with the same result. Thus was born the modern era of science. And here is where I am grateful to Klosterman, because I would never have the chutzpah to end a section about a conversation with Tyson like this myself, but what he asks is this: how do we know we're not currently living in our own version of the year 1599? And his answer on behalf of the status quo boils down to this: because this time what we know is actually right. He just can't let it go, though, without noting, of course, we are not the first society to reach this conclusion. So on the we could finally be mostly right side, there is Neil deGrasse Tyson. And on the but what if we're wrong side, Klosterman introduces Brian Greene, an astrophysicist at Columbia University. And while Tyson is a public intellectual, more used to defending the role of science itself in various forums, Greene is most well known as a proponent of the multiverse. One description is that the multiverse suggests there are infinite, or at least numerous, universes beyond our own, existing as alternative realities. Imagine an endless roll of bubble wrap. Our universe and everything in it would be one tiny bubble, and all the other bubbles would be other universes that are equally vast. It's a complicated way to think about space and an inherently impossible thing to prove. We can't get outside our own universe any more than a person can get outside their own body. Brian Greene did a TED Talk in February 2012 that has nearly 3 million views on TED.com now about the multiverse. Has anyone seen or listened to that TED Talk? For the folks listening on the podcast, that's about 2. It's somewhat mind-blowing. One of the connections he makes is how, as a string theorist, he posits that the shape of an unseen dimension defines the amount of dark energy in our universe, which in turn gives us unique physical traits in opposition to other universes in the multiverse that allow our form of life to exist here. Now, if that's about as clear as mud to you, that's the level of clarity that I had on it before I went back and rewound the YouTube clip, the TED Talk clip of it about a half dozen times to watch through and distill just this one sentence. So what you need to know for the purposes of this sermon is think Neil deGrasse Tyson, scientific consensus, Brian Greene, bonkers multiverse theory. So what it boils down to is this. In 2011, the Nobel Prize for Physics went to researchers who had published a discovery in 1998 that demonstrated not only is our universe expanding, but the rate at which it's expanding is accelerating. And as part of that research, they demonstrated the existence of something called dark energy, which is driving our galaxy and others away from each other. And what Greene is saying is that the exact amount of dark energy that we have in our universe is a defining trait of what makes our universe, and not some other universe in our multiverse. It's sort of like Johannes Kepler trying to figure out why the Earth was 93 million miles away from the sun. The right question was, why does a planet that's a given distance away from a given star have the traits that it has? He's saying that we should be asking, why does a given universe with a given amount of dark energy have the traits that it has? Not why does a universe with this specific amount of dark energy have the traits that it has. And that way we'll stand to learn a lot more than if we say, sort of the way that Kepler was approaching that question, why are we 93 million miles away from the sun, as opposed to looking at the overall question of traits. So his research as a string theorist has led him to craft a vision of the multiverse that has resonated with millions of people. And so both within and beyond the scientific community, we see somewhat this spectrum of confidence and comfort with where we are at in terms of the current levels and trajectories of cultural achievement. We've got the Neil deGrasse Tyson saying that since 1600, we have had methodologies in place that have meant each generation hasn't had to overturn the one before. And we have the Brian Greene saying that there might literally be infinity universes out there that none of us grew up even remotely imagining the possibility of. And we know he is definitely team we could be wrong, because Chuck Klosterman asked him directly what he thought the odds were that in 300 years someone was going to look back on his TED Talk and say that he got it entirely correct. And his response was, quote, less than 1%. So we're in the realm of you could be wrong. This guy's hand shoots up and he's like, yeah, now we're talking my language. I know all about operating in the realm of you could be wrong. By his own admission, there's better than a 99% chance that his big theory is not going to end up being what we think about the universe centuries from now. So yes, we could end up fundamentally rethinking aspects of how we understand the world in the future, but for any conceivable scenario that we can come up with about that future right now, there's a vanishingly small chance that scenario will actually be the case. Part of the reason I love learning about and preaching about mathematical and scientific phenomena so much is that I was first exposed to principles of quantum mechanics and what they teach us about our very literal interconnectedness in my own home UU congregation as a teenager. The idea and joy of opening myself up to new ideas in the scientific and spiritual realms is one that was planted in me early and has stuck. So I see the idea of you could be wrong as both an important reminder of the necessity of humility and an exciting invitation into seeing what is next and what is possible. What I take heart from is that even scientists on opposite ends of the fake spectrum that Klosterman sets up for the purposes of his own paradigm agree far more than they disagree. On questions like the age of the universe and trajectory of our beliefs about gravity, despite his best efforts as an interviewer to stir up some disagreement, the two retain a united physics front. On a deeper level, their adherence to that which is demonstrable and replicable experimentally and mathematically gives them far more in common with each other than with, say, the commenters on their respective videos that I made the mistake of scrolling down on while researching this sermon. And that's why I not so humbly suggest our persistent coming together in UU congregations is important, and that we may, in each of our lives, in each of the many families, schools, and communities that we go out to each week, celebrate both sides of that spectrum and that energy, saying to ourselves both, you could be wrong and you have a powerful truth. Because, folks, we are now quickly and unexpectedly entering a time when it may be a revolutionary act to uphold the principles of science, both fundamental and imaginative. The Washington Post this week reported that climate scientists are copying data as quickly as they can, fearing it will vanish under the Trump administration. President-elect Trump has called climate change a hoax. We can no longer take it for granted that social norms or cultural expectations at the highest levels can be counted on to uphold the ideals of demonstrability and replicability. What once we may have been able to take for granted now could need to become an act of courage. Our faith community will be a place to regularly replenish our reserves of courage in this time and to recommit ourselves to the difficult process of remembering, yes, we may be wrong, but we also have some very powerful truths that we are not willing to cede lightly. Peace, salam, shalom, and may it be so.